Hello, and welcome to the Feral Palace Public Talks. We are joined here today by our dear guest, Debra Solomon in Amsterdam. We are also joined by Gaia Mezricha-Solé and Crater's multi-species community. And we are joined by listeners from Mexico to Ljubljana. Thank you all for joining us. The Feral Palace Talks is the Feral Palace program is a program which we conceived in order to open up perspectives and raise questions and produce imaginaries about untamed urban territories, so territories of high biodiversity and of their meaning to our cities. We are running an open call right now. Open call ends on 22nd of April. We are inviting all creative thinkers, architects, landscape architects, designers to join forces with lawyers, ecologists, biologists, or similar professions, and go and read at our website the open call and possibly apply. We would be really happy to work with you on the question: what would be the palace of justice for all living beings? Why this particular question, and what is this space, Crater, which is object of our collective investigation, will be presented by Gaia now. She will give a short introduction, which will be followed by Debra talk in 15 minutes. So enjoy you all.
Thank you, Danica. We have pre-recorded this talk, so we kind of avoid the technical issues, and I will just put it into the StreamYard now. Enjoy. Hello also from my side. Again, my name is Gaia, and I'm a co-founder of Trajna Association and a co-initiator of Creative Laboratory Crater. I'm a trained designer, and over the past years, I have framed a transdisciplinary practice working on the field of ecosocial transformations. Today, I would like to shortly speak about the emergence of Crater and the activities which are unfolding at the site, so you could hopefully get a better idea of the multi-species community which is currently inhabiting this plot of our collective interest. Crater emerged from the project Symbiosim, Trajna's 5-year-long project working towards rethinking invasive species management in urban landscapes. We raised interest in invasive species since the current paradigm is oriented in prioritizing their forceful eradication. It, however, fails to recognize that their deliberate removal could prevent these vital species to successfully repair damaged ecosystems caused by mass urbanization, deforestation, and global trade. So if you wanted to move from extractive economies to fostering healthy ecosystems, we needed to invent new practices of care for the urban landscapes from which we took the gifts of nature. Instead of working towards eradication of unwanted newcomers, we invited people to recognize the opportunities invasive plants bring to our local communities. By taking them as companion species of the Anthropocene, we could better understand how and with whom to collaborate to build a diverse web of life in our damaged ecosystems. Our work then started to roll around harvesting the vital perennials in degraded greens and experimenting with various processes of their use. We used the wood of Tree of Heaven to produce nesting boxes for city birds, the shredded biomass of Japanese knotweed as a substrate to grow edible mushrooms, and created knotweed paper, our sustainable paper alternative. When scouting for potential locations for our practice, we bumped into an article in the local architectural magazine, which introduced us to a rewilded construction site in Ljubljana called Bežigrajski Krater. This 18,000 square meter plot, owned by the Ministry of Justice, was overgrown with a spontaneous ecosystem full of invasive and other feral plants. The public pressure from the media and the new policy which enabled temporary use of inactive construction sites led us to successfully sign a contract with the Ministry of Justice to use the site until the end of 2023, or the year when the new construction works for the port Palace are set to begin. It's been 26 years since the demolition of the old Austro-Hungarian artillery barracks. Because there was no consensus reached at the governmental level, Crater area remained vacant and fenced since then. From the moment of demolition until we started to work on the site, only two greater interventions were made into this ruderal ecosystem. One was the excavation of gravel, and the second one was the mowing of all shrubby vegetation in 2017. These events created conditions for the emergence of a very unique, yet hidden and overlooked ecosystem in the middle of the city. Such abandoned and untamed spaces where human intervention has ceased and nature has taken over can be considered as the third landscapes. A term developed by gardener, botanist, and theoretician Gilles Clément wonderfully marks degraded yet rewilded spaces where spontaneous wildlife is far more diverse than that of cultivated and preserved landscapes. On Crater, for example, we have listed more than 116 plant species, 21 bird species, 11 butterfly species, and 14 species of fungi, and we are still counting. Crater is also a typical pioneering ecosystem in which invasive and other feral plants started the process of regeneration of the damaged Earth's crust. The most prevalent plant communities on Crater are black locust, black poplars, common dogwood, and Amur honeysuckle. They produce abundant amounts of biomass and seeds, with which they create soil and attract other life forms to the site. Furthermore, Crater is hosting a community of exotic shrubs, plants which ran away from the neighborhood greenery and cultivated residential balconies. It shelters apples and cherries seeded by bypassers. This hidden ecosystem enables spontaneous encounters of plant, fungi, animal, and human communities from all over the world. Taking the regenerative capacities of pioneering species as its inspiration, we envisioned Crater to reintroduce wastelands as gardens of symbiotic multi-species companionships. Since its opening in June 2021, Crater has facilitated 25 creative workshops, a film festival, and 10 surplus exchange events, and hosted more than 300 schools, sparked up the production of 14 additional projects successfully financed by EU and municipal funds. Projects, which hosted internationally recognized designers, architects, and herbalists, introduced Crater as an interdisciplinary learning environment for eco-social designers and makers in Slovenia and across. And who are we? Our team consists of a maker and design strategist, Andrej Koruza, product designer, Rok Oblak, microbiologist and permaculture practitioner, Primož Turanšek, ecologist, Sebastian Kovac, our current design intern, Gaia Piga-Nachtigal, and me. The participatory nature of Crater also attracts other collectives and individuals to co-produce the activities on Crater. Now let me quickly take you around the site, present you how the space is currently organized, and what stories and events take place on Crater. After stepping through public entrance from Pericheva Street, we bump into a line of trees of horse chestnuts. Their tree trunks hold nesting boxes for birds, and their canopies provide us with green, great shade in warm months of summer. The chestnuts, which are standing on the site since the time of the old Austro-Hungarian artillery barracks, also act as a memorial, reminding us about the site's history. Moving to the crater. When the barracks were demolished, a business residential neighborhood, Bežigrajski Dvor, was built from gravel excavated from the site. Bežigrad district is renowned for this quality building material, which arrived from the Alps to the site with the river Sava a really long time ago. This summer, Dunajska Road was being renovated, and the municipality of Ljubljana decided to put the leftover soil material in the main crater. When the Ministry of Justice learned about this intervention, they ordered to the municipality to take the material out. The trucks created new compacted soil areas. This led us to start the work of repair by covering some of the disturbed areas with wood chips and replanting other sites with seeds of wild melliferous plants. Besides the soil-making activities, Crater Site also works as a space for our current material exploration. Right now, we're working with Atelier Luma and BC architects on a Bio27 design biennial project called Forbidden Vernaculars. We're testing the gravel, wild clay, and invasive plants to build a rammed earth installation to host tea ceremonies and public discussions about vernacular material cultures. In 2020, collaboration with Prostorush Architects and Association of Permaculture Slovenia resulted in 3 mobile workshops, wood and fiber workshop and a myco lab. We are carrying out most of our work in the central space of Crater, a roofed community space sitting between the wood and the fiber workshop, from which we're also hosting this series of public talks. Here, we organize diverse community activities, repair infrastructures, and design products with low carbon footprint. With the tools for processing fibers, such as the Hollander mill and the big cooking pot, we experiment with the biomass of invasive plants from the site. By cutting down the thorny black locust, for example, we created a safer space for children to play and produce the paper pulp, which can be used for a myriad of applications, such as bricks, paper bricks, or planting pots. The biggest container on the site is the myco lab. It was set up to host experiments with growing mycelium-based materials and edible mushrooms. On this image, Primož, the leader of MycoLab, is showcasing to participants of summer school Crater how mycelium is overgrowing the organic matter in the mold. The mold was designed to create a compostable packaging box for cups crafted from wild clay found on the site. At the end of the plot, we have situated a climate tree nursery with more than 200 trees of various species of hazelnuts, chestnuts, walnuts, and persimmons. The project was initiated by John Boscarino, a permaculture practitioner from US. This area also hosts a wild biodiversity. And we have also just built a greenhouse for growing seedlings for the community vegetable field in Ljubljana, run by a cooperative of young farmers, Agrodivizija. The municipality would only allow us to build this mobile infrastructure on Crater if we have claimed it to be an art installation. This exposed the capacity of the phrasing as well as art to successfully intervene into rather rigid administrative legislation. Project sustainability measures reflect in the infrastructure planning too. Compost toilet, rainwater collectors, hot composting heating system, and a bicycle station were installed on the site. And now we're moving to the last part of Crater. I would like to introduce, and this is the part where Sanctuary of Abandoned Potted Plants, a guest project run by 2 artists, Anna-Marie Groep and Eva Jira Hanžek, sits. The project sits in the shades of the chestnuts and an old plane tree. Eva and Anna-Marie find the flower-potted plants next to the dumpsters, shopping malls, or flower shops, or accept them if their previous owners can't take care of them anymore. At Crater's open days, on Tuesdays, residents can plan a visit and adopt the rescued plants by signing an adoption agreement. Next to the sanctuary stands the Pond of Wishes, our last station. The project was born in response to imbalances of aquatic ecosystems caused by the release of the invasive fish into the wild. The urban shelter hosts 15 goldfish that were caught from the ponds as they began to displace other species. Kids are invited to learn how the fish traveled through history to reach our local landscapes, as well as how to properly care for the animals, which most of them want to have as pets. And to finish it up, beyond its production capacity, Crater invites us to learn skills of self-organization, self-provisioning, and gain-situated knowledges about urban ecology and herbalism. This novel ecosystem teaches us how to co-design climate-resistant reserves in cities and improve livelihoods, not only for humans, but also for other Earth beings. In response to the ongoing species extinction, biodiversity loss, and climate change, we truly believe that it is necessary to rethink ways in which citizens are shaping a healthy urban environment. If we want to practice regenerative ways of inhabiting the city, we need experimental spaces such as Crater to exercise, question, and learn what it means to be a citizen in the 21st century and beyond. Thank you, and now I would like to pass the word to Danica.
Broadcasting live from Crater now. Now we will introduce our dear guest, Debra. We think that this practice of Crater really nice links. It is a nice link to what Debra does in Amsterdam. Debra Solomon is a PhD candidate at the University of Amsterdam in the Department of Urban Planning. In 2019, she coined the term multispecies urbanism, describing urban developments that gives primacy to multispecies interrelations and care of the natural realm. Solomon is a founder of the Urbania Huwe Foundation, which develops park-like public space food forest commons with locals. Current projects include a 55-hectare urban food forest in Amsterdam Zuidoost and a demonstration food forest from a former parking lot in Amsterdam North, whose topsoil and biodiversity has been described by soil and biodiversity scientists as paradise on earth. Urbania Huwe works with local communities producing climate crisis infrastructure in the form of food forest in public space urban greens. The name stands for the city as our farmyard, as Urbania Huwe implements resident-driven edible ecological frameworks. Solomon and Urbania Huwe works was shown at the Dutch pavilion of the 2021 Venice Architectural Biennial. Debra, we are very happy that you're having you here today with us, and the floor is yours.
Go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and shall I, oops, if I can put this first slide on. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for this for the invitation, the beautiful presentation of Crater, and also, yes, and for introducing me so beautifully. I'm excited to talk today about my practice, which is also the practice of many and not just me. On the human level, I work with Urbania Huwe, which is also a collective of people, and especially Renate Nolan. And we work with local communities right now in Amsterdam Zuidoost, and more than 70 locals, as well as the municipality. I'm going to talk about what I do, as this work has crossovers with my PhD candidacy and as an artist, infrastructure activist. So here we go. I started working on this subject quite some time ago in 2005, when I had the chance to read this wonderful book, Sea Pulse, Continuous Productive Urban Landscapes by Katrien Boon and André Viljoen. And if you look at the slide, you see the concept where they introduced a notion of spatial planning for urban agriculture, using every available green space to make a city a productive city in terms of food production. And after this, in 2010, I got to produce. That's when I started Urbania Huva. The Center for Art and Architecture in The Hague invited me to work in the Schilderswijk in The Hague, and there's a specific kind of public space which I'm showing you now. Here's the neighbors I started working with. And you'll see in the next slides the kind of green space that we have. So this is a sort of, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'll just assume you can. Where you have grass and tall trees, and maybe there's shrubs. This is this is public space of, say, 2 to 3 layers. It's a monoculture, it's allergenic, it's not productive. Really, and the neighbors wanted to have a productive space that had food in it. So we started to introduce a food forest. And I'll explain that in a second. Also in 2013, we started working with Foodscape. We started developing Foodscape Wildeman in Amsterdam Zuidoost, where also with a group of people, we designed a temporary garden and as a way to make a nursery into the rest of this area, and it's connected to the larger ecological framework. And this was really interesting to see how you could link sites together. In 2011, we had the fortune of getting our studio space. This is an image of the space, which had been a parking lot beforehand. And in 4 years' time, here it's 4 years old, already really developing a robust food forest infrastructure, many layers of green. Here's a fall picture. So this is the spring and this is the fall. And so indeed, like Danica and said, I had the opportunity to present the notion of multi-species urbanism, an urbanism that's driven by multi-species whole instead of capital, at the Venice Architecture Biennial. And what you see in front of this pavilion are these 4 rhizotrons. And a rhizotron is a way to look at soil. And these are showing an infrastructure maker, the multi-species ecosystem, the multi-species whole, the soil organism, as an infrastructure producer. What's going on in these images where simple pioneer plants, sometimes these are considered invasive, some are, sometimes not, these plants and their roots and all of the beasts that live in this soil are producing actual climate crisis mitigation. And they're doing that by producing by sequestering carbon and sequestering water, amongst other things. They are temperature regulators. These 4 frames, these 4 screens, as it were showing just a sliver of Earth if it were allowed to be, of soil, urban soil, if it were just allowed to be and not constantly disturbed, what kind of diverse and robust ecosystem can start to grow in a very short period of time. And this is a piece of some tempeh, because I don't have time in this lecture to talk about what soil is, but I often use the image of tempeh to explain soil, a portion of the soil. For people who don't know, tempeh is an Indonesian food in which beans or grains of some kind are bound together by mycelium. I won't get into tempeh making right now, but this is a really good metaphor for the soil, because a living soil is bound by, first of all, uncountable beasts and fungi. And the fungal mass of a healthy and robust soil is huge. And in the tempeh, we can see these grains and beans in the cut tempeh as like the soil grains, mineral grains or clay or whatever, and or even organic material, and bound together by this living mass. And in this sense, if we think of it this way, we can see soil as an infrastructure. There's also, not in the tempeh, but in living soil, roots coming down, bringing the sugar of the sun, of photosynthesis, down into the soil, so that literally the uncountable beasts living on completely different timelines can start to produce these infrastructures. And these soils also have a very wonderful material quality. In Gaia's story, you heard about when the municipality came and removed earth, and how it compacted the soil so that it killed a lot of these beasts probably, and it compacted it so the soil could not be spongy, it couldn't store water. So this is when a soil is allowed to be a soil organism, which is a multi-species society connected to the above ground, it is a huge infrastructure for the city. So in the biennial, in the pavilion, a lot of the works that I got to show there, made with a lot of people, all mentioned here, talked about this soil, for example, the infrastructural soil, and the food forest in Amsterdam Zuidoost, the project that I'm going to tell you about next, about the soil work that we did there with about 70 different locals in the municipality, about the power of aquascapes, of waterscapes, to do also similar kinds of work, about relationships, the cross relationships with governance, human governance and infrastructure governance through multi-species work, and so forth. Many different works. So I'm going to show you right now the subject of most of those works, which is an ongoing project of, at this point, more than 56 hectares in Amsterdam Zuidoost. You see, obviously, an adulterated picture from originally a drone shot. And you see the characteristic style of the architecture there, very dense. And on these highlighted green areas are the ecological framework of the peri-urban space. And we're going to, you can see that, well, this is the area that we're talking about. If you can see my cursor in the middle near the honeycomb shapes, the outside is the peri-urban, and this is a local park, the Nelson Mandela Park. And you can see what needs to happen. These green areas and this waterscape, they need to link to these two areas to make it more robust. And why would we want to do this in a Dutch urban green? It's because this is the place where there's the most chances to do so, actually. Dutch urban greens are designed and maintained for a universal human, and these areas in this area are not, the way they are designed and maintained now, or before we started the project, is not to produce a healthy landscape. They're sort of like a visual green, an aesthetic green. And they become allergenic, they create alienation, they also create ill health. In fact, the greenest places of Amsterdam are the places where there are the least healthy populations, which is kind of counterintuitive. They create these kinds of problems. Also, and mainly because of the way that they are maintained and designed. So these are the kinds of spaces, like really fantastic UNESCO, beautiful architecture, and then a lawn that's going to get mowed 22 times, rain or shine, by design. You see huge lawns. This happens to be an important lawn where many football matches are held, and you see a certain kind of woodland, but there can be much more productivity, multi-species productivity, and also productivity for human food. So here is a typical urban soil. Gaia was talking a little bit about the soils of Krater. This is a Dutch soil. This is not terroir. This is a constructed, composed soil. Comes from a place like this. Soils are imported. There's also recycled materials, but there is very little. These soils are washed and blow dried, not joking, to turn into this kind of substrate. It's not necessarily a living material. You can see these little tiny specks. Those are the places where life is. And then just the top layer where some pioneer species managed to produce this top soil on their own. Obviously, if you feed them, it goes much faster. So in this space, again, you see these honeycomb areas, and you see the metro line, just like in the overhead. We made a logical choice of locations, which end up being this Amsterdam Zuidoost urban food forest, which we call FABAZO, Voedselbos Amsterdam Zuidoost. That's an acronym, Amsterdam Zuidoost Food Forest. And this food forest is, you might not know what a food forest is, but I'll get to that just in a second, explaining that these different kinds of greens can create different kinds of edge landscapes. And we are going to look at food forests right now from different perspectives: historical, ecological, and social. But we're going to come back to this drawing, this map drawing later, and understand this area in a different way. First of all, food forests are about a certain kind of layer, and a layering of plant layers, and that's above and below soil. So also root depths are being addressed. I'm plugging this book. It's a wonderful book by Eric Toensmeijer called The Carbon Farming Solution. Talks very much about putting carbon in soils by changing the kind of the way that we are gardening, planting, and producing agriculture, but also agriculture for industrial products. So it's not only, hippie food for hippies. It's also, you can really make real building materials, real materials for all kinds of even industrial uses. The soil, which are urban soils, you see what you saw in an earlier slide, what they're made of. They have the potential to be a carbon sink. This is a concept diagram. It's not really how roots grow from trees, but it is so. There's an above ground biomass, and below the ground subsoil, we have 2/3 of this biomass. And it's not just roots, it's also all the beasts that live there in this rhizosphere. And Toensmeijer uses this term carbon farming. It's a hack, actually, because this term is used in a different way. But if we apply this approach of using perennial plants, so to have diverse woodlands in edge landscapes, like we have in our cities, or inserting different plants into our cities, it has a huge potential that is completely untapped and completely uncalculated. It's a way to pay back climate crisis debt that we have wreaked, the industrialized countries have wreaked on developing countries. And also in terms of the CO2, carbon dioxide sequestration, the reduction is not yet considered in notions of calculating carbon dioxide sequestration. It does not consider perennial agriculture, agroecology, or forest gardening, but it absolutely does not count the urban space. So this is a place to win in terms of local climate crisis mitigation. So quickly about what food forests are from a historic, ecological, social, and governance perspective. Food forests belong to all of us. This is the oldest form of agriculture. Mesopotamia, grains are not the oldest form of agriculture. That is food forestry. Land stewardship using perennial plants is the oldest form, and it's up to 60,000 years old, and it's native to all of us. It's not extractive, And when you don't screw it up by burning all your wood or making ships out of all your wood or using your wood in a not well managed way and having to go to other places to get that wood, you can have like societies that were later conquered, you could have up to 800 years of peace and huge amounts of food and materials abundance. Ecologically and technically, food forests are utilizing openings in spaces, and it's about inserting different kinds of layers into these spaces. So you can imagine how the urban space is particularly well suited. So it has to do with canopy trees, which are often there, but then under this lower level fruit trees, shrub layers, sorry, and a ground cover underneath the soil. There's the rhizosphere. There are climbers that are going horizontally and vertically, again, above soil. There's fungi, the fungus sphere, and also waterscapes. But it's also a food forests have also this huge social potential. We see this really clearly in the slides of Krater that Gaia showed us. So I'm going to kind of skip through these, but these are images of developing the Amsterdam Zuidoost Food Forest in the Bijlmer. You see the locations in winter. Also, as an educational space, there's absolutely, I can hardly think of any subject that can't be taught in a food forest. Even we were working with students in The Hague, teaching biology and English and Dutch. These are students from other countries. But also, there are things that food forests aren't, and that they aren't simply a planted landscape. They aren't a replacement for landscape architecture. They can be landscape architecture, but they need to be governed and interacted with completely differently. They are not a good temporary fix. They are not a good way to save money per se. It's not that they necessarily save money. They're going to save a lot of damage and future damage. But they're very costly in terms of human resources. They don't lend themselves to technocratic problematization or obstruction because they need to be developed in terms of seasons and natural realm issues and not human governance issues. So you need a governance that's willing to work with you. And it doesn't lend itself well to management forms of urban greens that are not willing to learn or understand how this can be a different kind of management that needs to happen. You need more site knowledge, but you need less hours. But you need a more interesting kind of interaction with the space. I can imagine that this kind of job is not very pleasant, to go around with a weed whacker and make everything bald. This is also causing drought that we have in the Netherlands and urban heat island. I can imagine that if this person were involved in checking when is it a good time to do ecological mowing, things would be going a lot better. So back to the map. Here we apply different kinds of food forest or edge landscapes to different kinds of locations. And I won't go into the details of that, but we ended up with 5 different typologies: woodlands, meadows, the banks of the aquascapes, and highly used public space, and food forests that could have an intensely educational function. And here we have a space that is right in the heart of this area. And you see it at a very important time. That's actually right about now. This is taken 4 years ago in next week. And what you see is an enormous amount of nectar. You see all these blooms. Even some of the trees have already bloomed. Look at this. If you were a pollinator, you would be going crazy right now. Look at this. And and that's really fantastic. You see also enormous amounts of habitat. except for something is going to happen. I think it's in the next slide. No, we still have lots of beauty and habitat and nectar, food sources, habitat for the multi-species whole. Also for humans, look at that winter purslane. But then we get this mowing that goes on 22 times, rain or shine by design, the old-fashioned way of managing these scapes, and you get erosion and drought from something that was really lush. Here we have more of it. This is a so-called well-tended greenscape. Here we have beautiful planting going on, lots of nectar, wonderful, luscious, and delicious. And then in the next day, suddenly there's a tractor of this size compacting the soil that needs to be absorbing water right next to a waterscape. And it's being prevented from doing that. Look at this incredible damage. Most of the damage and also the droughts and the urban heat island is produced by this form of maintenance. And the soil, in terms of how it is governed, the urban soil is thought of in a different way. Is not, well, before this project was pretty much primarily thought of in this very technocratic way. Here we see an image of soil in terms of how many pipes, how much infrastructure it can contain. And this infrastructure needs to be continually accessed. So no matter what's growing on top of it, still needs to carry these kinds of pipes and wires. Realizing this in the course of developing this project led to some very interesting reports that came out, and it led to, thankfully, a change, because we had a huge amount of allies within the municipal governance that helped us to steer things in a different way. It's really important to realize that governance is not monolithic. It can be very horizontal. Sometimes we think that's a good thing. Sometimes, or we say in the Netherlands, in terms of our municipal governance, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. That's how horizontal it is. But due to a huge amount of allies that we had within the municipality on district and municipal levels, we were able to turn this around. Because there are also within the municipality really good examples of management. Here we see a field, a meadow being developed, and we see an edge that's made somewhat okay for humans. And we, through this collaboration, we're able to create a new management system for this entire area. And maybe you don't remember the weird shape that Fabazo is, but you can kind of see it in this yellow and green area. You could see the shape of Fabazo in this drawing, so that we changed the areas to an ecological landscape. So this food forest is not only foods for human, it's food for insects, for a soil organism, and the things that eat insects and all the parts of the soil organism. So one of the things that we developed, and this is strongly fed by my colleague Renate Nolan, is this. This is a new way of mowing, and this is one example of ecological mowing. This is the ecological mowing that we do there. We're in the process of practicing it with the municipality and the mowing contractors to produce mowing this way. What happens when you mow this way? I'll explain what the mowing is. You have in 1 year, you mow 3 times, not 22 times rain or shine by design, starting in April and ending in October. No, 3 times. Once April, May, after 80% has bloomed, you mow a third to 40% in one pass. This is not a spatial drawing, but a concept drawing. In a second mowing iteration, June, July, you mow another third hopefully at perpendicular to the one that you mowed before. It overlaps a bit, So you can imagine now you have different heights. So this is the original height. This is mowed. This is mowed. It's now grown back a little bit. This got mowed again. And this is being mowed for the first time. This remains. So you can see animals, insects, also below ground, they have escape routes. And they also, when we are mowing at 80% fluorescence, when 80% of the meadow plants have produced flower, drop their seed, they are also producing woody roots. So they're sequestering carbon. They're sequestering something that can start also absorbing water, because this organic material digging and lightening, but also strengthening the soil. And then a third pass in September, October, where you get 50%. And you see how there's still a part that has never been mowed. And there's parts that are of different height, also subsoil. In the second year, you do the same, except for you start in a different direction. So that's an ecological mowing concept. This is showing how many different kinds of people are involved in a project like this. This isn't even all of the people, but these are, say, like the core group that are involved in such a project. It becomes really vast. Now, it's a good time to then get back to Krater. Here are some images showing the green. Well, here you see Krater. Gaia already did a really great job of this. And some buildings around, or that are scheduled to come around. I'm not quite sure. But one thing you're going to notice very soon, here we again see Krater in the middle of Ljubljana. You see the river, Sava here. You see some forest bits. But you see in this next image, these are a series of images that I took from Google Earth. And again, right in here, you can't see Krater yet, but you can see this forest here, river here, and forest here. And here we have an agricultural belt. I'm going to zoom in. And now I think, can we see Krater? Not, yeah, I think so. We start to be able to see Krater. It's in here. It's one of the darker dots. And that's not, the reason I'm showing this zoom in, we're going to zoom in farther, is these are the biodiverse areas. See? And here's the river. Here's an agricultural space. These could be monocultures, but you can see there's some dark green areas here. These are going to be the most biodiverse areas. We're zooming in. Again, you'll recognize this shape. Okay, can we see? Now we can see Krater. See there? It's right in the middle. This dark green. It's actually a very biodiverse area. And here it is. Whoops. Now I'm, yes, it's right here. Right here. And you see that it's actually one of the most important parts of the city in terms of biodiversity. For this to be designed and built, and having tractors built up, and even if there's a park that's scheduled to go in here, you can understand that this is a travesty, an ecological travesty, because at the moment it's actually the most important part of ecologically of the city, or one of the most important parts, and it needs to keep linking up to other spaces. Let's get in a little farther. You see it. I don't know. I think this might be a little bit before the big digging of the gravel. And I don't know if we get any farther in. No. But so you can see how important it is, and how these areas need to be strengthened ecologically, linked together. And I'm almost done. This is a bit of essential reading. I'm studying urban planning, so that's a social science discipline. So I'm not really allowed to talk too much about biology so much. But anyway, this is a wonderful article where they talk about the amount of space needed for certain kinds of biodiversity, spatial minimums. And this is a very accessible, legible article, even though it's academic. And I really would invite everyone to take a picture of this and read this article. Even if you don't read every little bit and understand all of the literature review, you'll be able to link this to, you'll be able to understand some very important tables in this article. And this woman that is on this slide is Val Plumwood, and she made a really nice idea about what the multi-species society is like. So I kind of hacked it, and I always use it to end a slideshow. And I altered her citation to her text to change it into this one, which says, in good cities, we must produce public space in such a way as to acknowledge our kinship with those whom we share our space, which does not forget the more than human that we are, and which positions the production of space as multi-species. And with that, I will end my talk. And hopefully there's lots of questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Debra. Thank you for this wonderful talk and the great reference you made to Krater. What I like as an architect, I think that urbanism is often taken as something which is highly controllable and predictable. We are trying to predict everything, and then with your projects and your narratives, you are introducing unpredictability into urbanism. And I think that what nature did here in Krater is completely unpredictable, and we don't know how to deal with it. But hopefully, with your project and the thinkers such as Klaas and Gaia, will introduce this slowly but surely into urbanism and schools. Now we already received some questions. Gaia, maybe you would like to read them.
Yeah, thank you again from my side as well.
You're welcome.
To read a question from, sorry, just with another question, just a second. From Ria Kut, hopefully I pronounced the name correctly. And she would like to know if you have any links to this ecological mowing strategy, the ecological mowing strategy that you were mentioning. My colleague, I think.
Okay, I do not. I mean, I can get them, but I can also share our mowing scheme. I can share the diagram that we made. I can, because my colleague is working with Dutch ecologists, so if the person who asked, I don't think so. But I can, I would have some local references, but otherwise I will look them up. And otherwise, I hope I can share the diagram. And this is not something that we invented. It's an existing framework for a concept for keeping things at different heights. And also, there's many more ways of doing ecological maintenance. Also, for example, if you're working with animals, grazing animals, you would do things also slightly different. So all I can say is you can have the diagram that we produced, and otherwise I will look up some. I have Dutch ones, but we'll look up some English.
We can also make sure to gather the links from Debra, and then we send it to you if you applied, registered to the lecture through Eventbrite. And I will continue with the questions from the online audience. There is the next question coming from Urszka Szkerel, and she's asking if you have any research data on how projects like food forests improve biodiversity, soil quality, and similar parameters. So information that could be sold to officials to change maintenance plans for green public spaces.
Yes, I do. However, I do. These are available, proving the biodiversity. This is not very difficult, except for one thing. The people that govern urban green spaces are, first of all, a very diverse lot of people. And I don't know how they work where you are, but in Amsterdam, wait, I have to, before I start coughing again, they are not swayed by, I have done research on this. It is not like proving that this is more biodiverse. There's no question about the biodiversity that it produces. And it seems odd that that is not the driving factor, but it isn't. That is not the concern of people whose concern that is not. That is, it is not something that all officials in charge with dealing with and maintaining urban greens are concerned about. Climate crisis is not everybody's concern. Water and carbon sequestration are not everybody's concern. It seems strange to probably everyone here, but no amount of saying this does this the best would convince them, because there are other considerations which, if we have time, I can go into. For example, and maybe cut me off if I'm going on too long. In Amsterdam, one of the officials that we were dealing with was concerned with hygiene, and also, I would say, outdated notions, or let's say different understandings of a clean city. There's a lot of litter that is blown around in this area. It was thought to, it was mostly, that has to do with a lot of different things, not humans just throwing trash all over the place. In fact, it also had to do with the time of trash pickup, animals moving things around. Also, it's a really complex problem. But it was being dealt with by mowing. So mowing, all this trash and plastic bags flying all over the place, and plastic flying, packaging flying all over the place, was landing in lawns and woodlands. And one way that it was being cleaned up, it was that it was getting mown. And when we did the soil, when the Amsterdam Zuidoost Food Forest community did the soil samples of the entire area, we found microplastics in the soil from the mowing. But the soil looked clean. There weren't huge bags. It was just getting mown all the time, so it looked like it was getting cleaned up. So officials that were doing that or making sure that the mowing happened, in their perception, are cleaning things up, just keeping things nice and tidy. Also, the different heights of plants. For example, last year we were not able to get the first mow of this mowing schedule done on time. What does that mean? Well, it meant that in June, when the first mow actually happened, some of the plants were like 4 meters tall, some of a meadow. So you can imagine how that was shocking to a lot of people as well. It requires changing ways that are really ingrained, and required a huge intervention by our allies in the Public Works Green to change and shift. And we didn't get on the first go, which was an entire year, we didn't get that ecological mowing right in the area yet. So in the next week, if anybody's visiting Amsterdam and visiting Amsterdam Zuidoost, you might notice that actually either next week or the next, we're going to have our first mow really during the time that it's supposed to be happening. And we'll get it right this year. But these things are really, they take a lot of time. Next question.
I think we have another quite similar question coming from the Kuzu Culture Initiative, I think from the US.
Kuzu Culture.
They're saying super informative, thank you, and saying that they are working on similar issues, getting the stakeholders on board, like municipalities, private owners, power companies, department transportation, to commit to holistic strategies that you were kind of also introducing to us. And I think the question is around the accessibility of your kind of inventions, let's say. So are you okay with other groups using some of your model to show these types of stakeholders in other places?
Absolutely. This needs to happen everywhere. I mean, I think that every group, which with their own site knowledge, will be tailor making places, new methods. It's not like it's not the Bible. These every group that is working is going to have specific site knowledge. Every municipality, group of municipal stakeholders that are allies are going to be different. Some are going to be like really good allies, different. Also, the local community is going to react in different ways. So I think feel free, if things are useful, please use them. But I'm sure that everybody's local site knowledge will be informed the best.
Perfect. We're having quite a lot of questions today, which is great. Thank you all for being with us and being so curious. There is another question coming from Masha Green, and she would like to know if you have any suggestions how to cope with devastated areas, for example, areas that were recently damaged by the fire, maybe in connection to the drought season that we're also experiencing. Hopefully not so much anymore, but
well, where is this question coming from? Geographically?
From Ljubljana, but maybe Masha, if you want to, specify.
Okay,
Because
well,
we had a fire in the woods in Slovenia last week, I think.
So maybe
that is the context, I think.
Oh. Well, yeah. What I would say is public spaces need to be maintained to keep as much water and carbon in the appropriate carbon places and in the soils. And this will sequester water so that they are not as susceptible to fire. I mean, I don't want to bagatelize. I don't know what kind of fire you had, or I've seen fires in southern Italy, also of public space parks, that looked and seemed really devastating at the beginning. And in the end, it has the potential to create a new edge landscape. I don't think it has to be a complete disaster, but what does need to happen is in a rainy season or any potential rainy season, we happen to be having rain right now, but for example, Dutch springs, since climate crisis, are notoriously dry. So we would need to be if we had had this similar situation, we would need to plant in the autumn so that plants can root and start like shrub plants in different layers building up in the autumn, so that we would be able to, they would be able to flourish in the different kinds of light and water situations of our springs. So I would definitely say don't dry out the city more through ridiculous mowing practices and maintenance practices, and try to make the urban greens more layered and robust. More edge landscapes.
Perfect. Are you having another question, Danica, maybe?
I think that Turshko had another question, but we haven't answered that.
Okay, one. Sorry.
We haven't posted that one. Another question to create linked green corridors between green patches. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea how for nature within urban cities can travel?
So how far nature can travel?
How far nature within cities can travel. For example, for insects and seeds to travel between crater and the next green unkempt patch.
Yeah. Well, so that article that I put up explains that really well. And it explains, first of all, it talks about minimum amounts, like spaces of 53 hectare. I think it uses 53 hectare as a minimum of spaces that can be wilded. I don't even know, but made more robust and diverse in terms of robust edge landscapes, because it's not about this one seed and this one plant or this one orchid. It's about, these are really complex networks, and there are key species that need that take, for example, a really long time to set up. If certain species, that if their habitat is removed, they're going to go very far away or they'll die out. So it's not a simple management system. Basically you need to be parceling out a minimum of 53 hectare to robustify so that with an edge landscape. And I keep saying that word edge to say it's not only a forest, it's an edge. That's where diversity is happening. A meadow is not like a super nutrient rich soil. It's a poor soil. That's also the opportunity of the city. And that creates the most opening for biodiversity. So it's an area where you practice a certain kind of maintenance that you need to be maintaining. That article explains it. There's a table in that article. Maybe I should just sometime just show that table. It explains different kinds of biodiversity and under which conditions they flourish and how much space they need. So please look at that article. And if you can't get it for any reason at all, if it's not somehow open access, then I will also send it.
So we have just another question. It's from Javier Acarin from Barcelona, and he says they have a terrible air pollution problem. And were you able to analyze how these models of urbanism affect the quality of air?
We did not yet model. We did not yet do that. So I can only assume that more surface area, like if you think of the surface area of a plant or a tree or a shrub, you can imagine, I mean, there are known values. I don't have those at hand, but you will be able to find values about the filtration of certain kinds of plants and how plants can become buffer and filter air, particulate from roads, for example. But I don't have that, and we did not measure that yet. I can say something about temperatures, though, because in the demo garden in Amsterdam North, a studio of Urbania Hoeve, in the summer, when it's really hot outside, there can be a 10-degree difference in temperature. And also, when it's freezing in the winter, there's also a minimum, a 10-degree difference. There are places that don't freeze at all in the back.
Yeah, this is what we felt last year at Crater, because the summer was really hot, unbearable hot. And when we entered Crater, it was like 4 degrees or I don't know, 6 degrees less here.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Also, I notice in the demo town, in the demo garden, that there's different seasons. That's just simply, that's the same thing. And this is also drought prevention. If we remove green coverage and different layers, it's like, first of all, it's literally removing water, but it's removing shade. We shouldn't even be ever looking at soils. We should only see many, many layers of vegetation. Everyone who studies permaculture is taught that right from the get-go. So I hope that that's enough information. I don't have a lot of those kinds of figures, because I gave up on trying to use them strategically to convince municipal stakeholders in our situation. That was never the thing that made people decide to do it or not, strangely.
What was the decisive factor?
Just finding enough allies to produce consensus in the municipal organization. That was that. It was also not. We mistakenly thought when we first got the commission in 2018, we thought the city of Amsterdam had just declared a climate emergency. We wanted to be the first city that would say, yes, there's a climate emergency going on, and we're going to do everything we can. But then we assumed that this is just a lack of knowledge of what governance is. We assumed that everyone would quickly align themselves according to these understandings of what it means to keep areas moist and cool in the summer mostly, and to indeed reduce particulate, to get more social use out of green space and so forth, more education on it. And that was not the case. And finally, just creating, slowly massaging more consensus out of with our municipal allies was the only thing to date that has worked. Forming a process management team that helped processes which weren't in place come into being. So we had to develop new policies. But we, as civil society, as artists, infrastructure activists, and project makers, even if we're researchers, we can't produce that policy. It has to be in conjunction with governance, and that goes very slowly, but it can be, with continued pressure, we can produce it. And in this case, we did.
This is great to hear. It gives us more hope.
It's the beginning, just a little beginning.
It's a crack, but
it's a crack.
Yeah. So this is the last chance if you want to post any more any question. And if you want to work with Debra further, she will be a mentor of our open call. The mentorship sessions will take place in May. So we'll continue this conversation then. Go check it. I think that we have a link. It is in the chat. So you can check the open call, and hopefully we will work together on this really, really incredible place, Krater.
Show it here again.
Yeah. So this is the link to the open call.
And the sessions will take place on Fridays afternoon. So at 5 p.m., I think we had some questions of international interest. So if you're coming from non-European countries or somewhere where the time difference are, is a bit different timing than in Ljubljana, then make sure that you can attend to those sessions. But of course, everyone is welcome to apply and work with us, and we would be super happy to have you on board.
Debra, you're getting some. Thank you for your lectures.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
very exciting.
Yes. Thank you all for attending the talk. And you're invited. We have another talk, the last one from the series, on 19th of April. It will be Rock Krajnc, and he will actually talk about how to govern more than human transformations. So some of the things that Debra already tackled in her talk, but he'll go into the details. Also with regards to Krater situation. So I'm sure that it will be also very informative. So keep posted.
Yes, it will happen on 19th of April, again at 5 p.m. Hosting from Krater, and we're still not sure where Rock will be at the moment. I think it's in the Netherlands as well right now. But let's see. And thank you again from my side, Debra, and everyone who joined us today.
Thank
Have
you.
a great afternoon and evening, and hope to see you soon.
See you
Okay.
soon. Bye.
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 Bye.